Hey guys, Chris here, and I'm Ukrainian Canadian. Today is January 24th, 2025, and let's get to the news and updates happening in Ukraine and Russia, shall we? Very quick video today. I'm going to talk about two big news that occurred overnight and early in the morning. First, we'll cover the massive drone and missile offensive by the Ukrainians across 13 Russian regions overnight, and then I'll talk about our favorite bunker clown, Putin, who came out today from his bunker to comment on Trump's ultimatum. And if you guys watched my previous video, you might know that Trump issued an ultimatum to Russia saying that if you don't sit down on the negotiating table, I'll impose even bigger sanctions on you and I will crush your economy. So the bunker clown didn't have a choice but to come out. Now, let's talk about first the massive and significant drone offensive by the Ukrainians. The Russians claim that Ukraine used over 120 drones overnight to target several key facilities. And the two most important ones, and I share with you guys an image of the impact of one of these Ukrainian drones or perhaps even missiles on a Ryazan oil refinery. And this was a quite impressive, I should say, explosion of the oil refinery. It looked like almost a nuclear detonation, but this is a very big oil refinery that is not too far away from Moscow, so it's a very significant facility for the Russians. And the second biggest target that Ukraine managed to damage overnight was also a microelectronics plant in Bryansk. This is not the first time that Ukraine struck this plant. They did so, I think, a few weeks ago as well. And what is important about this plant is that it produces key components and chips for the Russian military equipment. So the Russians claim today that they had to shut down operations in this plant because of the damage, the extensive damage that occurred. So you can see that the Ukrainian sanctions continue to work, and Ukraine is really focusing on choking the Russian war economy. All of these facilities are fueling the Russian war economy, whether it be plants producing chips and key components for their military equipment or oil refineries that then allow the Russians to export refined fuels or export raw oil, then that is also going to be a very big impact when these key facilities are getting damaged or destroyed by the Ukrainians. So you can see that the focus continues to be these key facilities that are helping fuel the war effort in Ukraine. Now, let's talk about Putin and his comments today, following an interview with a reporter from a Russian state TV. And he talked about being ready to talk to Trump. So you can see that Putin drastically changes his tone when he's talking to the US or external nations. He drastically softens up. Whereas for his internal audience, he always says that we will not get ourselves be bullied. Russia is strong. We will win against everybody, kind of these like strongman narratives. But as soon as he's threatened, especially by the strongest country in the world, the United States, you can see that Putin is softening up, and as a matter of fact, is even flattering Trump. So here's what Putin said. As for the issue of negotiations, we have always said, and I want to emphasize this once again, that we are ready for these negotiations on Ukrainian issues, Putin told a reporter from Russian state TV. But Putin added that the question of negotiating with Ukraine was complicated by the fact that its president, Volodymyr Zelensky, had signed a decree preventing him from conducting talks with the Russian president. So it's funny, and it's not surprising to me that Putin is trying to throw the ball back against Ukraine by blaming Ukraine that it's just their law that's preventing us from holding talks. And what I'm seeing here is a strategy by Putin to try to delay the negotiations as long as possible. Putin also then described Trump, who this week threatened to hit Russia with new sanctions and tariffs, as a smart and pragmatic man. And he said he did not expect Trump to make decisions on sanctions that would rebound on the US economy. I seriously doubt that. If for the last 3 years, the US already had been imposing sanctions on Russia without even a dent on the US economy, I seriously doubt that this time it would somehow impact the United States. Russia thinks that they're somehow bigger than the world, but their economy is an underperformer. And let's not forget that it's just a massive gas station, first and foremost, that most countries have now managed to diversify the imports of the gas of Russian gas and oil, so they're not as dependent on Russia anymore. So this is the good news here as well. Therefore, then Putin continues, most likely it would be better for us to meet based on these realities today, to talk calmly on all of these areas that are of interest to both the United States and Russia. We are ready, but I repeat, this primarily, of course, depends on the decisions and choices of the current American administration. So you see how Putin is throwing the ball back at the United States, at Ukraine, essentially gaslighting and saying, we were always ready. We always wanted to talk. It's just that it's Ukraine, or, you know, it's the Americans that are not, you know, presenting us with, of course, a rational path to these negotiations. And the strategy is quite clear for Putin right now, is to delay as long as possible by trying to stroke Trump's ego, flatter him, and essentially kind of sway Trump to not impose these sanctions, perhaps even remove some of them, by making him believe that this is Ukraine's fault and not Russia's fault. Because Putin absolutely needs to have this war continue. He's not interested in stopping, and why would he, when he has the momentum in Ukraine in terms of gaining territory? Of course, it's very limited gains with catastrophic losses for the Russians, but Putin is trying to grab as much as he can before all of this will inevitably end. And Putin as well doesn't feel right now that he's forced to sit down, because even though we know that it's a point of no return for the Russian economy, it's going to crash and collapse. It's a matter of time. But Putin right now isn't being forced within his circle by the Russian population. There is no pressure right now by the Russians. There are no massive protests. There are no massive flash mobs of Russian people burning down ATMs and grocery stores and just, you know, putting sticks in the wheels of the Kremlin. None of that is currently happening. So Putin feels quite safe. He understands that the Russians have accepted the neglect that the state has imposed on the Russians. They're quite fine with it, as a matter of fact. They're fine to die on the front line. So Putin has no reason to stop. As much as we're seeing all of these catastrophic situations occurring very soon within Russia, Russia's going to pretend until the very last moment that everything is great. Like it did back in the Soviet Union, where they were saying until the very last moment that our economy is strong, our military is strong, we haven't been so great ever before, right? And then everything collapses, and the world would like back in the Soviet Union when it collapsed was like, what happened? How did we not see that happen? Well, that's because Russia pretended until the very last moment that everything was okay and that they got the situation under control. So that's what's going to happen. And I wouldn't be surprised if out of nowhere Russia just falls apart. The Kremlin falls apart. Putin's power falls apart. But of course, this also depends on how strong the sanctions are, how strong, how capable Ukraine is going to be in defending itself over the next few months. And what I believe is going to happen with regards to Trump's threats to these sanctions is that at the 3-year mark, I think he's waiting for the 3-year mark of this war on February 24th or end of February to essentially take further action against Russia. And that's good news for us, because I see that Trump is not the one that wants to waste time anymore. He's been presented with a brief summary of the situation, and his advisors, who are very competent, have told Trump that, look, Russia's not trying to play fair game here. And one huge motivating factor for Trump is really getting that Nobel Peace Prize. He wants to get it as quickly as possible. He wants to cement his name as quickly as possible during his second term. And he doesn't want to waste time with, let's just wait it out. Let's talk with Russia. Maybe 2 more phone calls. Maybe I'll fly to Moscow and talk with him. Maybe I'll convince him. Like, he doesn't want to waste any time. We're seeing that. And he's going to take action very quickly. Again, I want to reiterate before I end this video that Trump is not pro-Ukraine. He just wants to get the medals, the prizes, and he wants to end this as quickly as possible. And the fact why he's not pro-Ukraine is he made statements today saying that Ukraine should have never fought back against Russia, that this war would never started or wouldn't be so bad if Ukraine had fought back. Again, a completely anti-Ukraine statement, as if we should be blaming the victim and not the aggressor here. But all this to say that the good news is that Trump is taking decisive action. He understands that Russia is not a good faith actor, that their conditions are ridiculous right now to sit on the negotiating table, and Trump will take severe drastic actions against Russia over the next few weeks, I have no doubt, because he wants to get his Nobel Peace Prize. He wants to bring an end to this conflict. He wants to focus on other things, such as, unfortunately, annexing Greenland, turning Canada into the 51st state. So you also can see that there's a lot of negative stuff with Trump as well. So I'm not here praising him. I'm just saying that in certain areas, he's doing the right thing, and in certain areas, he's doing the worst of the things that he could. So with all that, thank you guys for your support. I really appreciate your comments, your support for this channel, and your support for the Ukrainian cause. And with all that, thank you so much. Slava Ukraini.